What's up guys, Shawnthebro here, and today we're going to be going over 3 different methods of applying an animated level select or stage select screen, depending on what you want to call it, and also we're going to be going over just kind of different ways we can make this screen look better. It doesn't have to be animated, but we'll use pictures and render targets, and we're going to try and get the best fit for your game. So I've got 3 methods today. I've also added a new character. His animations are a bit broken because I've only started working on him about 20 minutes ago or so. But I wanted to show off kind of what we got going on here. We have stages in the background. We can do animated stages and videos. We can go ahead and show off the new refinery scene with a new character. Thank you so much, Shadow Magnus, for this awesome level. Again, you've outdone yourself. We have an amazing stage here that we're referring to as Refinery for now. And again, you can see the new character, his walk cycle and his attacks are not that great. His attacks probably also loot because I haven't really set up a ton of his logic. But I just wanted to show him off that I'm working on him. And also show off the new stage that Shadow Magnus made because it is awesome. I've increased the length, the distance that the characters can walk so that they can walk to the blockers on the stages. On all the stages so that you can see them on the sides and truly explore all the levels, just because I thought that was a good improvement. Simply all I did was change the distance in the camera boundary episode that we edited, or that we created. That way we simply have more space the characters can walk before it blocks them. Okay, so to get started, like I said, we have 3 methods today. So I'll show you what they are, where they are in the blueprint, and then I will go ahead and explain each one in detail, and I will put little text at the bottom of the screen most likely that kind of covers basically when you'd use this and what method we're on, so it doesn't get too confusing. I'll also try and put in some timestamps so you guys can skip around if you'd like, but I might reference other things in the video, so I'll try and be as good with that as I can. But anyway, I know it's a little confusing because this is up top, so let me move this real quick. I just thought of it now. Alright, so we have 3 methods. This is method 1, this is method 2, and this is method 3. So method 1 is going to be using render targets. Render targets are essentially objects that it takes a capture from a camera and applies it to a material, and then we display the material on an object. The second method is using a media player on our widget. If you can see, my stage preview actually has something on its background now as opposed to just a black screen or a black overlay. And we can use a media player to play a video, or even use like a still image you can actually do with media players if you wanted, and apply something there. And then method 3 is actually just using a static actor in the scene that we change its material, so we change basically the picture that's on it. They all have their ups and downs. There are a few more methods. There's another method that could actually have dynamic scenes in your stage select. So if you wanted to have your characters in front and still have a dynamic scene in the background, like you see if I do this and I select this guy and I do this, you see when I change, these guys are in front because we're using render targets. I'm using videos for these ones because these maps are a lot more involved. You could absolutely do a render target with these too, and it would be fine. It will eat up a ton of your memory trying to do all this on the main menu. It might even make it choppy and drop frames. So what you'll want to do is either decrease the resolution, remove parts of the scene that aren't, remove parts of this that aren't being seen because the characters are blocking them or because they're off the camera. And lastly, and most importantly, you'll simply want to level stream it. I say simply because that's all you have to do, and that can pretty much solve your entire issue if you level stream the parts that you need. But we haven't gotten into level streaming yet, so I'm not going to be covering it today. It is pretty complicated for that small little enhancement. You'll notice that a lot of fighting games don't really do that too much. They usually have a video or something in the background as opposed to actually loading the scene. That's exactly why. I'd recommend doing one of these options, at least for now. You can feel free to explore the other options that are out there. But Okay, let's get into it without further ado. So If you want to do part 1, render targets. Render targets are, and I know I just closed it, but it's this one, where we're actually loading the scene behind the character. So what this is we have these 2 maps loaded in to our main menu map, and I'm actually just switching the view target that we're looking at. That's method 1. So if you'd like to do method 1, it's going to start right after the explanation of the other 2. Okay. Now, method 2 is applying the media player, which is where the video is playing. So it's animated, and its quality is good, but you don't have your characters in front of it unless you have some sort of either another render target or some sort of thing on your widget to display your characters, since we're displaying our characters in 3D space. So that'll start at, I'll put a time down in the description if you want to use that method. Lastly, if you want to use the third method with images going on to an actor in the background so that it's all 3D, the way we do that is we simply have an actor in the background, like I said, that's got images, and this one's actually failing to load for some reason. I'll probably have to reapply his texture. I don't know why he's failing to load, but we actually have images in the background that simply we're switching the material of the actor to these images. So if you're using this method, you can actually still have your characters in front. Oops. I was like, why does nothing happen? I was on the wrong box. And then when you change it, you can still see them in the background. They're pretty high quality images, but yeah, you don't have videos on them. And you can use this method, by the way, to put videos on them, but they're going to be a little blurry, which is why I recommend it. If you want the full dynamic scene, you'll probably want to do level streaming. So now, these are the 3 methods we have. You can also, instead of doing this, you can simply change the background to that. Very, very simple. It would be easier than doing this method. The reason I'm showing you this method is because if you want to keep some elements 3D, you can change some things in the scene to make it look that way. Like, I'm just using a plane in the background to apply that image. So sure, you can put it on the widget, but if you want to have the characters in front, then you might want to have this actor in the background changing its image instead of the background of the widget. Okay, so part 1, render targets. Let's get into that. So render targets consist of a material, something called a render target in Unreal, and a scene component, which is what captures the image we're looking at. So I have a setup already in place, but I'm going to make a new one for you guys so you can see the whole process. These are the things you'll need. So we're going to need to right-click and make a material, and I'll call it MRT2, Material Render Target 2. We need to right-click and make a render target. So if I go to right-click, Materials and Textures, Render Target, and say RT for Render Target, and say Render Target. There you go. And then if I go into my new material, and you might want to pull it off, that way you can minimize it like this. You can have a smaller window. You can actually just drag in from your render target texture here and drag it into the emissive color channel. Thanks to Sean Foster for that tip. I was doing it a much more complicated way, and this is much easier, so thank you. Okay, so once you've done that, everything else you can leave is fine. You can definitely do some other things in here, like change the lighting or the material domain, which will kind of change how it looks or what it's meant to go on, which could be useful. But for now, I'm just going to leave it like that to show you guys. You can hit apply and or save. Save will automatically apply for you. Okay. When you go back into the main menu, now that we've added that, and you need to look for something called a Scene Capture 2D. So if you bring a Scene Capture 2D into the world, like I have, and scroll all the way to the top, I don't know why I was at the bottom when I brought this in, but you'll have something under Scene Capture Texture Target that you can fill out. This will actually take a render target. So you can search for it if you want. We're already here, so you might as well just drag it in. And what it does is, you can see, like, okay, so I'm looking at this RT render target, right? So I have the view of the camera is essentially what I can see. So if I get an object, now we'll be using planes in this episode, but just to show you, you can use anything you want. So I can use a cube. Now on the cube, it takes a material, put in your render target material, and then this cube will now see what the camera sees. So if I move this camera, you can see that the cube, you can see the cube inside the cube, it's moving inside here. As I move the thing around, and I'll bring these together, and you can actually see, it's really cool. So, sorry, I gotta bring it kind of far, but you can see, as I'm moving it, what's inside is changing. I can see my characters now, right behind it. I can see the cube itself, because that's in shot of the camera, and I can see this part of the level. So that's how render targets work. They take what this camera is seeing, this scene capture 2D is seeing, and display it to a material. That material can then be put on any object, in this case a cube. I'm going to delete these because I've already got some in place, but that's how you can make it. But just note, this is render target, so you can literally call this RT_render target or whatever. Doesn't really matter. This is my material. This default scene component that you see is actually just my scene capture 2D. I went ahead and brought it into the scene and clicked blueprint, add script on it. Don't worry, I didn't change anything within here. So if you do this, what it'll do is essentially convert this actor to a blueprint. You determine where and the name. So I called it blueprint scene 2D component, and I put it in this folder. There's no reason to do that other than the fact that then I can search for all actors of this class and then use them in the level select screen widget that I have. And same with this plane blueprint. Don't worry, there's nothing special there either. It's literally just like we used the cube. I brought a plane into the scene. I actually rotated it up because he was rotated. You know, he was flat down. And then what I did is blueprint add script. That way, when I bring one of these into the scene, now I can bring this guy in. And it looks like I was a fool and made the blueprint before I edited the location, or the rotation, but that is fine. The point is, I just made this so I can access the plane blueprint actors from class whenever I'm in my stage select, level select screen widget thing here. So don't worry about changing anything in here, but I would recommend grabbing a scene component 2D, making it a blueprint, and grabbing a plane and making it a blueprint so we can search for them later. Okay, so now we've got everything for the render target. We just need to apply some logic to actually make the scenes that we want to make. So I've actually got a plane in here that's invisible currently. I'm going to make it visible just so you guys can see it. You don't have to change anything with this either. I went ahead and did some stuff on my own. That way, I have the settings I want. For example, I don't want to cast shadow because it was making a shadow on the object behind it, which I don't want. I want this to basically, when it's invisible, it's just completely invisible. So I uncheck cast shadow. I made it invisible by default. I'm making it visible for you guys now so you can see it. And I went ahead and added a tag. I have two planes. I have a second one behind it that has the images on it. This first one that you can see now is the render target one. So I went ahead and named it, or tagged it like that. I could just also change the name, but either way. And you can see here's the other one, just in case you were curious. So I do have two. Now I'm going to get rid of this one again, make it invisible again, and go back to this one. So you don't need to actually see anything going on out here, but I just want to show you, I brought in a plane, specifically my plane blueprint. That way I can find it in my widget here. You'll see where that becomes relevant. And what I've done is I've gone ahead and put it right in front of my camera behind where my characters are. I want my characters to pop up on top of this. Okay, so these are my character spawns for player 1 and player 2. It's behind them, so the characters will pop up on the screen and this will be rendered behind them. That's what we want. That's all you need to do in terms of placement in the scene. You can also look at this and make sure that it looks good. Make sure it's covering the whole screen. I'm going to make this invisible again. Actually, I'll leave it up until we switch to the next one. Okay, let's go into our level select screen. Now, if you haven't watched my episodes on level select screens, that's fine. but you might be a little bit confused as to what is going on here. So I will leave a link in the iCard in the top right corner for my stage selection tutorials. Alright, so we're going to go into our event graph, and I'm going to do a bunch of stuff on event construct. Now this will kind of relate to what I was talking about earlier as to why I made them into blueprints. So this is my event construct. We've already done this in previous episodes. I'm showing you after we set up our input actions and we move our icons to where we want them to be, then I'm doing some extra logic here. So all I'm going to do is actually just go ahead and add all my actors of class of our blueprints to actors that we want. And I'm also going to go ahead and set the proper plane to draw things to. So to start off, if we're using our render target method, we want to make sure that we use this default scene 2D blueprint thing that we made. It's worth noting, you don't actually have to make a blueprint to grab all actors of the scene capture 2D. In fact, I can show you. We get all actors of class. You can simply search for scene capture 2D. You don't have to make a blueprint out of it. You can also simply search for plane. Oops. But plane, you will need to, because plane isn't actually an actor. It's simply just basic geometry. However, like I said, you don't have to for the scene capture 2D. I do it because for me it's easier to know exactly what I'm trying to get. I know exactly where I've added what actors, so for me it's easier. Simply, if you get all actors of class and choose your blueprint, you can go ahead and drag off of the out actors, promote it to a variable, and you'll have an array of default scene 2D capture widgets. So I'm going to go ahead and delete the new array. I've already got one. You can see I call it stage camera array. Then the other logic, the rest of the logic that's in here, is literally just going to determine if we're doing this on a render target or if we're going to do this on the image preview one, which is the third method, and it's the thing I made visible on the other plane. If you remember, I said I tagged them. So what we're going to do is get all actors of class again and look for our plane blueprint. We're going to loop through them. Just drag off and type for each loop. You can do it with the break if you want, but it's not necessary. There should only be 2 in the scene. You can add as many as you'd like, though. Then we're going to drag off of the array element. This is the current plane blueprint we are on. If you drag off, you can search for your static mesh component. Scroll all the way down to the bottom, usually where it's at, and get it. And then you can search for component tags right here, which are these things that we set earlier. If I could find it, here we go. It is right in front of my face. So render target. This one is tagged as render target. The other one is tagged as image. So what I'm doing is I'm just dragging off of this and typing get. I'm getting a reference because it's a little bit cleaner that way. And then I'm checking if that reference is equal to a specific name. It doesn't matter which one you search for. I can either search for render targets, right? Was it render targets? Nope, just render target, my bad. I can either search for render target, like this, or I'm going to delete these now because you can see them right above. Or, like I do above, I just search for image. It doesn't matter which one you search for. There should only be 2. If there's more, then obviously determine them, look for their tags. But if there's only 2, you can either search for image or render target, and then if it's true, hey, this is image. If it's false, this is render target. Now these variables, they're just plain blueprint object references. So literally, you can drag off of the array element in for loop. You can see that it's getting brought down below here, and you can promote it to variable for each of these. And just make 2 of them. And then call them image preview array and render target preview array, or whatever you want to call them. But basically, all you have to know, this is the plane for the images. This is the plane for the render targets. Either way, we got to render one or the other. So if you have a specific method you're choosing, you don't have to do any of this logic. Just literally grab your plane blueprint and set it equal to the one you want. If you're doing all 3, like I am, then go ahead and do this logic. I know some people will probably be doing all 3 just to help them learn, so that's why I'm trying to explore it in depth. Now we want to go to our move selection, which again, this is from our stage selection stuff. And we need to use the new things that we set up to determine what image we want to display or what render target we want to use. So in this case, again, we're using render targets. So all I do this is specifically for player 1. This is a little bit of hacky logic just because I'm adding this to show you what you can do with it. You can put this wherever you want. You can make it work however you want. What I do is whatever player 1 is currently selected in terms of the stage select screen, whatever they're currently hovering over, that's what we're going to display. So that's what you see this logic doing here. Player 2 doesn't do anything. Okay, so I grab my current P1 selection, which is the box we are currently hovering over, and I do a switch on it. I've got 4 levels that are important to me, so I have 4 cases. You can also do a default. So if it's 0 or 1, we're going to be using the render target. We're going to be using either the level I brought into the scene here, the test map. This is just my test map, okay? Or we're going to be using the room I call training room. These are technically 2 different maps. Now I don't have the other maps again because of how large they are. It would lag my computer quite badly if I brought over both the Trail of the Wise and the Inferno map and tried to do it with render targets. So that's why level streaming would be important. But I was able to bring over these 2 lesser maps that are simply blockouts. Okay. So, and for the record, if you want to bring your stages over, you can literally load up a different map. Go into the World Outliner. Click on something in there. Hit Control A, you'll copy everything. Hit Control C. Or if you hit Control A, you select everything. If you hit Control C, you copy everything. And then you can come back into your main menu, open the level, and then don't overwrite everything, but click into the scene somewhere and hit Control V. You'll paste it all, so you can paste your entire level. Worth noting, if you do that, we're not setting up a different game mode for the menu yet, so if you bring over the player starts and all, you'll actually be playing the game during the main menu. So make sure you don't have any player starts, any game cameras, anything like that if you do use the copy method. Okay? So if it's 0, we want to go to the render target that is displaying the default map, which is the gray one here. If it's 1, we want to display the render target that's over the training room, which is that purple and green one. All we have to do, the logic is the same for both of them. We just have to separate what map we're doing it for. We go ahead and grab our stage camera array. And I'm going to actually delete. I didn't realize I didn't delete these other variables. We grab our stage camera array, bring it onto the scene. We loop through it, as you can see above. I did a for each loop with break. I don't use the break, so it's not really important to do that. And what we want to grab off of it is the capture component 2D, because we're going to tag these cameras as well. That way we know which one to go to. So, on these guys, you do it the same way you do it with planes. You click on the camera, scroll down, and then you have something called tags and capture component 2D and scene component. You can apply it to whatever one you want. Just make sure you remember which one you apply it to. I applied it to tags capture component 2D. So you have component tags in both. Just hit plus in one of them and add a tag, test map. Then my other one, in my training room, I have the same thing, except it's called training room in my component tag. Okay. You don't need to use tags, but tags are just a nice way to kind of separate some logic and figure out what you're on. So I'm using my tags and the capture component 2D. So I drag off of my array element, type get capture component 2D. Whoops, not 3D, 2D. And then scroll down to the bottom. It's right here. Drag off of your capture component 2D, type get component tags. Right here. And then drag off of this one more time and type get and a reference. This is the same way I was doing the plane stuff in the constructor, so feel free to just copy that logic. But make sure what you're looking for is relevant to your scene captures. Test map is my gray map, and training room is my purple and green map. So what I do is, if I'm on my test map, this is my gray map, then I do a branch. Now, what I do is, if I'm on the test map and the tag says test map, then we know we're supposed to be displaying the test map render target. So what we want to do is make sure that the captured component 2D is not set as hidden in game, and that it is also set to be visible. So drag off your captured component 2D, set hidden in game, and make sure it is not set to hidden. If this was checked, it would be hidden. So we want it to be unchecked, not hidden. Propagate to children doesn't matter in this case because it doesn't have any children. And then also drag off of it and set visibility and make sure it is set to be visible. So check that. That's how we know that our render target should be displaying our test map. Otherwise, if we don't find test map as a component tag, then we know that this is not the render target we need for the selection we're on. So we want to do the same thing, but we want to check set hidden in game, and we want to check or uncheck set visibility. So essentially, this enables the scene component to output the render target view to the material, and this disables that. You can see the logic below is actually the exact same, except for the training room. So I go through my array, I get my capture component 2D, I check to see if it's training room. If it is, I make sure it's not hidden in game and it is visible. If it's not, I make sure that that render target is hidden in game and it's not visible. Regardless, at the end of the day, I also go ahead and set some logic to make sure that we can see everything we want to see. We'll get into this when we do part 2 right after this section. This is the background for my widget. So if you do have a background on it, you don't have to ignore this part, but we didn't really cover it yet. Basically, I'm just making sure that my widget doesn't have a background that can be seen. That way we can see into the world. Just like this. Because we're using a render target here. So if I had a background on my widget, you wouldn't be able to see any of this. Okay? Then, I also go ahead and make sure a render target preview array, which if you remember is what I set in construct when I found out that the component tag was either render target or, in this case, technically, that it's just not equal to image. And what I do is I set that static mesh component to be visible. So if it becomes invisible, because I mark it as invisible when I'm done with it, because I don't want to see it. I don't want it to be blocking everything. I want everything to be dynamic. So it can be visible, but if it's invisible because I was using a different method or because I unchecked it, we have to make sure it's visible when we're using our render target and when we want to display it. So make sure you also set the static mesh to be visible. To avoid confusion, what we're setting here to be visible is the scene capture 2D, the camera. We're making sure that it is visible because we're making sure its capturing component 2D is visible, which is what we actually grab the texture from, the view from. So we have to make sure that's visible, and then we also have to make sure the object we're displaying the render target result on is visible too. And that's all you need for part 1. Now, to be honest, that's by far the most complicated. The other two are a lot simpler, but that one can give you the best results depending on how you set it up. Now we will begin method 2. Method 2 is just using a media player to display an image over the background of the widget. So you can use a media player for a video or a simple image in your widget to display it as well. Simply to cut down on work, I've split the maps. So the first 2 maps, the training room and the test map, are the first 2. They're method 1 with render targets, and 3 and 4, which are Trail of the Wise and Refinery, essentially my forest stage and my, refinery stage, are 3 and 4. So they are where I have open source and set visibility here. But you could do this with images over the background like you see here. What we're going to do is show you how to make a material that can play a video and be animated. If you want simply images and you don't want them animated, well, you don't even have to really do much here. You just literally have to grab the image that you want to show. So if you have a specific image you want, just change it. Make sure that your image that is covering your entire canvas here, covering your entire widget, is a variable. And then you can go ahead and grab that variable, background stage preview, and set the, I believe it's set brush from material right here. And then you can set the image you want. If you want a video, like I'm using for those 2 maps, then I'll show you how to do that right now. Okay, so here we go, part 2. For part 2, I have both my planes set to invisible because everything's going to be done on my widget, and the rest of the stuff that's not will be marked as visible when it's time for it to be visible. So you don't have to see anything in the scene. You don't have to do anything in the scene. Let's go to our content folder. Now, if you want to have what's called a movie, which is something a media player can play, then we need to have it in something called a movies folder, actually. It's not a big deal in editor, but if you don't have this movies folder in your content folder, then it won't actually be included in a package. So you won't be able to see this when you package the game and try and have other people play it, which doesn't make a lot of sense. So go ahead, right click, make a new folder, and call it movies. It has to be spelled like this and everything. Make sure it's spelled correctly. Capital M, I believe, also matters. Go into it, and we're going to make some stuff. So the first thing we need to make is, if you right click, you can do media, and you want a file media source, or, and this is what I do, I import my video. Now, I don't think I have my video on here in an importable manner, to be honest. So if I go into my movies, oh, I do. So if you go into your movies folder, this is where you're going to bring your movie into. You can use MP4s, AVI files. I think there's others that work as well. Those are the two I normally use. So I have two videos here. One is the refinery, and one is the Trail of the Wise. So those are two separate videos. You can see 17 seconds. I forget how long this one is. 18 seconds. Open. When you open, I'm not going to do it because I've already got it and it'll complain at me, but it'll bring up this, a file media source. If for whatever reason it doesn't let you do that, you can add a new one, click into it, and then just set the file path to be where it's at. Make sure your movie files are in this content movie folder though. Otherwise, you won't be able to have them in a package. Now, it will warn you, for the record, right here, if it's not in the right path. So open this up and just make sure. Now, I've imported both, so I have a file media source for both. Sometimes when you do this, depending on the engine, you'll automatically get a media player, but I didn't. So if you just right click, go to media, select media player, it'll make a new one. You just open it up, call it whatever you want. I called mine media player stage preview. You can see all your stages here, or all your videos here. So you can right click and hit open, and then it will play your video for you. You can set them to be looping if you want. Everything else can pretty much stay the same. I make sure that I set mine to looping because I want them to loop if the players are on the screen the whole time. Then it can restart the video. That's fine by me. Just a quick word. So Unreal does have some minor issues with playing the media player in the editor. So sometimes your videos won't load. It'll usually tell you if they're failing to load down here. If that's the case, then you'll kind of just need to open the media player, open the video, and hope it works, or close it. I haven't found a reliable method to make it come back, but it most likely doesn't mean you've done anything wrong if you're getting errors, or if you can see it opening the media player, but it's just showing us like a blank white or black object, then a lot of times that is just an issue with Unreal. So if you see that, not necessarily anything you've done wrong, just try and make sure that you're aware of that. Now, again, when you make this media player, sometimes it'll make a media texture. It doesn't always, just because Unreal is weird like that sometimes. I think it does depend on the engine version and things like that. If it does, great, open it up. It'll have the media player already set, and you're good to go. You don't need a source path or anything, just as long as the media player is set. If for whatever reason it doesn't, then go into right-click Media, Media Texture, make a new one. Go into here and set your media player, and you're good to go. I'm going to delete this one. I don't need it. Lastly, what you need to do, and you can see some weird stuff's happening as I'm changing things around. So sometimes, if I see things start to look weird, like it's going white, then maybe I'll play a video, and then it'll go back. But once you have your media texture, right-click on it and create material. Once you've created a material, you can go into the material. I can't remember. I don't think this is brought in by default, so make sure you bring the RGB into the final color. And make sure you set the material interface to be, the material domain to be user interface, because in this case we're going to be using it on a widget, not in the scene. So a surface is like if you want to apply it to an object in the scene, this is going to be displayed right on our user interface. So you want to make sure it's user interface, and then bring the RGB into final color. You don't have to set anything else specifically, but feel free to play around with it. There's different options depending on if you just click in the scene and look at details, or click on your texture sample. So if you are more familiar with this stuff, you have plenty of options. And then apply and save. Okay. Now, in our level select screen, you can see that my stage preview just went white because I saved, and Unreal doesn't like when you change things. Again, this could be an issue. It might not display properly. If you want, just start playing a video to be safe. It should fix it. And you can see that it looks like it did. Quick note, if you've been a long time viewer of the series, I had a black background on here that was invisible, and I've just made it visible again. Well, I've made it hidden, right? But it was literally invisible like this. I've made it visible again. It's a black background. Be careful. I had the coloring set to be black, which means it was being completely overridden, and it wasn't showing the video. So make sure you set all the colors back to default, and just make sure it's set to hidden on game start. That way we can make it visible when we want. But if you see it just playing a black screen and you think you've done everything correctly, make sure that the colors are set up properly. Okay. Now what you do is, if you didn't have this image, then just drag an image on, literally like this, and then make it the size you want. Again, I'm gonna get rid of that. But all this is an image. You can look at the brush here. This should probably be closed by default. But in appearance, just look at brush and color. Make sure your colors are all ones. And then in your image, you can set a material as long as it's a user interface material. And guess what? The material we made, mStage Preview, we set the domain to be user interface. So now if you go in this material, you can select mStage Preview, just like this. And once you set that, then the video will play once we tell it to play. There you go. Make sure it's also drawn as an image. I don't think you have to do that, but I have had issues in the past with some things not drawing if their configuration was different, so image is probably the best way to go. Make sure it is a variable, and then let's go into our graph. What we want to do is make a variable. Make a new variable, call it Stage Select Preview Media Player. You can call it whatever you want. But basically, make sure you look for media player as its type, and just grab an object reference to it. Then you'll have to compile and save so you can see this option, but go set the default value to the media player you have. I've only got one, so mp_stage preview. Then whenever we get to the case where we want to play those videos, in my case it's if I'm hovering over either of their tiles in the stage select screen, I want to play them, you just drag this onto the screen, drag off of it and type open source, and it will let you pick what video you want to play. So I want to play either my refinery or my Trail of the Wise. If I'm on 3, or excuse me, if I'm on 2, then I want to play Trail of the Wise. If I'm on 3, I want to play refinery. And you can see I'm doing that here. Once they've started playing, that way there's no flicker, I go ahead and grab my background right here and make sure I set my visibility like this to be visible. Alright, and then we'll check that out. You guys saw the render target, but I'll show you all of it at once. So now we have our characters. We have, this is our render target, right? We have the scene actually displaying behind the characters in real time. Now, this is our widget. Okay? Now, if you saw a little bit of flicker at the start, you're like, oh, it looked like it was playing Refinery. That's because it was. That's because the media player, if you don't have separate media players, it will play whatever was playing on it last, even if it's invisible. And if you noticed, I was playing Refinery on it last. I kept playing on Refinery. However, you can't really determine what the character is going to do, since they could go down and up to Refinery. So what I'd recommend is actually wait, maybe even give it a delay before you make it visible, and that will eliminate that issue if you don't like that. Or don't give it a media source at all to play by default, and then set the media source and make it visible. That way it's not playing anything originally. Okay guys, lastly, let's get into part 3, which is displaying images to an actor in the scene. That way they can still be behind the characters. It won't slow down your game at all, and it's quite simple to do. All you need to do is bring an actor into the scene. I brought in a plane. I mentioned this during part 1, but if you're skipping around because you're only interested in part 3, then what I've done is brought in a plane, rotated it up, and I've technically gone ahead and made this into a blueprint so that I could find it in the scene. You don't have to do this as long as you have an object reference to it somewhere. But since it's a plane and it's just basic geometry, you won't be able to find it and get all actors of class. So I'd recommend doing this anyway. Just hit blueprint add script once you've selected the plane, select where you want to put it, and type in the name. Then I've made sure that my material is whatever map I want. So by default, I have some images called thumbnails, and all they are thumbnail. And all they are is it's a material that has an image on it. Simple enough. So if you want an image that gets converted to a material so you can put it on an object, you just need to import an image. I call them icons. So default image icon, you can see it is it should tell you what type it is. Here we go, default level.png. I just have a source file in here. I have 4 levels, or 4 images, one for each of my levels that I use. So I've just imported these. You literally, to import them, if you need to, you just click import, go to where your image is. Like, I forget where mine is, so I'll do a quick search. Oops, I thought I hit enter. We'll do a quick search for it. .png. There we go. So, like, I have this image here, and I just imported it again. It's that simple. So I'm going to get rid of this because I don't need it. But that's how you can import them. Once they are imported, all you have to do is go to where that's at, call it what you want in the scene, like I called this one default level icon and all that. And once you have your picture here, you can right-click on it and create material. Once you create material, that's how you get your thumbnail. That's what I call it. You can call it whatever you want, which just looks like this. You don't have to do anything in here. Just make sure that the color is connected to your base color. And the material domain can be surface because we're going to render it to the plane. Okay, so once you've done that for all the levels you want, all the images you want, then what you can do is set your default to be the material that you want your default level to be. Or if you have a default image before the character selects a level, that's fine too. Just set that. I also went ahead and set it to be visible by default for this case so that you guys can see it now, but usually I'd leave it invisible and make it visible when the level select / stage select screen pops up. I also removed cast shadow just because it was causing a problem with I was seeing other shadows from the other plane. Not too important. I mentioned it in part 1. Again, if you didn't see it, it's not a big deal. But that's why I unchecked it. Lastly, and one more time, I did mention this in part 1 as well, but I've simply separated these by component tags because I am using multiple methods. If you're just using the one method, then you don't have to add these component tags. But this is image. The other plane that I have is used for the render target, so I've set it up as render target in the component tags. They don't do anything right now. They're just a method of kind of differentiating what planes I should display things to. So this is my image plane, and I've got 2 separate sections of code. So for this section of code, I need to drag the line over here. You don't have to do that. You don't have to change anything. But I'm doing this wherever player 1 moves their selection. Then we update the image. So whenever they move where they're highlighted on, we want to change what image is being displayed. If you need to see how to do that, I have a stage selection video that shows just that. I will link right here. Okay. So if you aren't using the render targets, then you don't need this. And if you're not using more than one method, then you don't need to do any of this. But what you do need to do is get all actors of class, the plane blueprint that we made. That way you can find the plane in the scene. You can literally drag off of this and type get a copy, and get the 0 index, because if you're only using one method, you should only have one plane in the scene. If you have more for whatever reason, obviously accommodate. And then drag off of this guy and promote to variable. This will be your image plane. So get it, if you only have one plane blueprint in the scene, if you get all actors of that class, find out there's only one, and the one you want to render to is index 0. So I'm going to delete that. I'm going to delete the variable that I made, but that's how you do that. Now, back to move selection. This is where we're going to do the actual logic. So what I do is I have a switch on the selection I'm on. I have 4 maps that are relevant, so if I'm on any of the first 4, 0, 1, 2, or 3, then I'm going to do logic. The logic is very simple. So the plane in the scene has a material on it, right? We said it earlier. All we're going to do is grab our image preview array, which is essentially, this is determining what our images are. This is what we set up here. This is my reference to my plane that I was telling you to set, where you can set with just the get 0 index off of this array. Okay, so once you set that variable, the name I realize isn't great, so this is not even an array. This is just image preview. Let's rename this to avoid confusion right now, actually. Okay, so there we go. Image preview. So this is my plane blueprint, and then I have to grab the static mesh component. So I get static mesh. Get the static mesh component, it's at the bottom. When I have this, I can set material. Set material. This one right here. You don't need the one that says static mesh component because we're already using static mesh component and all that, so you just get set material. Then all of the logic is the same for all 4 of them. The only thing that changes is what image we use. So if we're on the 0 selection, then we're on our test map, so we want our default level. If we're on selection 1, we're on our training room, so we want training room image. If we're on index 2, that's Trail of the Wise, and if we're on 3, we're on refinery. All you do is select the drop down and search for the material that you want. These are the thumbnails we made earlier, so you can actually type in, if you called yours the same thumbnail, and you can find the 4 of them. Default level is the first, training room is the second, Trail of the Wise is the third, refinery is the 4th. Then all of the paths leave the same. We set visibility to the static mesh component, which is our plane right here. Okay, because remember I made it, it's visible now, but I technically make it invisible by default. Or if you do make it, or if you're changing between any of these methods like I'm doing, then you'll want to make sure you set it back to visible. And there you go, guys. So that's how you can actually have all these different methods of making more advanced level selects, stage selects in your game. Each method kind of has its ups and downs, so what you want to choose might be different, and let me go fix this. You see that your texture wasn't loading like you saw mine was just there? What I normally do to fix that is I grab the material, I drag it onto where I want the texture. It'll show up as the checkerboard. That's fine. Open up the material itself, this guy, disconnect it, reconnect it, hit apply, and since it's in the world, it should be, the changes should be applied to the material on here, which should show up, and then you can save it. Now I can set it back to the default, hopefully. Here we go. And then I should be able to go through all of my options. There you go. So those are all 3 different methods that I wanted to cover in today's episode about stage selection. You can pick and choose. You can use some of one, some of the other. Whatever you want to do. Again, there are other methods, specifically using level streaming is probably the most powerful that I can think of. I will be covering level streaming at some point in the tutorial series, so if you're very interested in doing that, we can pick up on that later. The good thing is what I've done today won't get rid of, like, the stuff in the level stream won't invalidate the stuff we've done today. You can still use this for pretty much everything. We just have to change the way we load in the levels. So anyway, guys, this has been a long video, so I think it's about time we wrap it up. But thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed or this helped you make your level select a little bit nicer, please subscribe. It's the most important thing you can do for the channel, and it just helps me out, lets me know I'm doing a good job. Also, recently, guys, we hit a milestone that allows us to become part of a membership for this channel. So you can see a join button now over by where the subscribe button is. If you click that, it's essentially, for those that don't know, it's basically like Patreon but directly on YouTube. You get perks for supporting the channel that are specific to YouTube or whatever. Like I have a bunch of perks about being in the credits or getting these templates for free when they're released, and you can now do that to support the channel. I won't be locking anything behind those, so anything that you already have, it will remain that way. I'm not taking anything away for those that aren't part of the memberships and part of the community, but I wanted to make that known, and I want to thank you guys for helping us reach that milestone. Over the last year, the channel has been You guys have been so supportive of the channel, so loving, and I appreciate everything, all the help and support and love that you've given. And thank you so much for helping me reach this awesome milestone. Lastly, guys, if you do want to come hang out with me on Twitch, twitch.tv/Shawnthebro27, you can come watch us. We're going to start Dark Souls 3, actually, this following Wednesday, because we finished Dark Souls 2. That was a wild journey. Very, very happy to have been able to complete it. And we're going to be finishing Resident Evil 7 on Madhouse difficulty this Friday, which I'm also pretty proud of. So, thank you guys so much for watching this video. And I'll see you in the next one. I'm Shawnthebro. Goodbye.